Yo, everybody, what's going on? Christopher Lopez here with the Beast Life 24/7 podcast, the podcast for men who want to take their life to the next level. We're on episode number 5, and before we dive in, what I want to do is tell you to go over to iTunes, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, or Anchor, or even YouTube. This is available on YouTube as well, and subscribe to this podcast. I'm going to be covering quite a few topics that I think you're going to find interesting that will take your life to the next level. The purpose of this podcast is to help you guys not struggle with the things I've struggled with in business, relationships, and other forms of increasing your success. I've been in business for 6 years. By no means do I know everything, but there's a pretty good chance that I've struggled quite a bit with the same things that you have struggled with, and I want to try and relay this information to you. So, just my way of giving back. So in today's episode, what we're going to do is cover whether or not reading is a necessity to take your business to the next level. If you are a business owner or you are just simply somebody who wants to take their life further, there's a good chance that you have been told to read books because books are a way to grow, or even audiobooks, which we'll get into a little bit. But books are a way to grow and further your mind and explore different ideas and different things. And they go over ways to improve business, improve sales, improve marketing, improve yourself. And as you know, if you're not improving yourself, you will not grow. Your business will not grow. You will stay stagnant, and there's a good chance you will continue to be unhappy. So that said, is reading good for your business? This is a topic that I may have a different opinion than a lot of people do, a lot of guys do, but I'm going to share that with you. So going back to high school, when I was in high school, I was an average student, a B and a C student, not because I was not smart. It was because I didn't apply myself. And one of the subjects I did not apply myself was in English. The reason being is the books that we read in English class I thought were terrible. That's the truth. You know, I used to read things in high school that I was interested in. I read things on engineering and things on electronics and things like that that interested me. But as far as the classics go and literature, it had no interest whatsoever. So I didn't read the books, and I would get C's in the classes and not do very well. But it all comes down to the fact that I just decided to not read the books because I didn't feel like it. Not the smartest move when your subject of English is based upon whether or not you read. So going back to that, you have to find books that speak to you. There's a lot of business books out there that everyone says you have to read, that are must-reads. But there's a good chance that a handful of them are not going to speak to you. There's a good chance that you may start reading them 1, 2, 3 chapters in and realize that they are just not the books for you. Now, you can do one of two things here. You can continue to read the book and finish it because you feel like you need to because everybody else says how great of a book it is. Or you can take it and give it to somebody else. Stop reading it 100% and completely stop reading it and give it away to somebody who you think would get some use out of it. The reason why I say that is because there's a good chance if you do finish the book that you're not going to apply anything because you don't remember anything because it didn't speak to you. On the flip side, if you do read a book and it speaks to you and you feel what the author's saying, you feel like it makes sense, like you know what I'm talking about. You read a book and you're like, wow, this is good. That's the stuff you implement. There's only so many hours in a day, right? So there's only 24 hours in a day. Why waste your time reading a book that doesn't speak to you? Right? Why people may not agree with this, but I don't really care. But this is how I kind of do it. And I urge you to do the same thing. If you're not getting anything out of a book, give it to somebody, give it away. So there's somebody that will get something out of it, but it's just not you. The other thing that I wanted to touch on with books, we're going to go over a few bullet points here. The other thing that we're going to touch on with books is that there are a lot of people that read books and they simply don't take action on them. They simply just take the book and they finish it and they say that was a good book, and then they take another book and read that, and they go through this series of books and they read and they love the points that they take home with them, but they don't actually apply them. And not to use the gym as a as an example, but you see this all the time in coaches and trainers, is that a lot of trainers pride themselves on getting certifications, but they don't pride themselves on applying what they learned and actually getting their hands dirty and training clients. And you will actually learn more from taking what you learn and applying it to clients than you will by sitting in a textbook and stacking up all these certifications that half of which you may not even use. So there is something to be said for somebody who picks the certifications that they want, or picks the books that they want, and the things that speak to them, and then apply them. You can't get ahead by simply prepping, by reading, and not applying. It just doesn't work that way. So you have to apply what you read. Another point that I wanted to make about books is, just because somebody tells you to read it doesn't mean you have to read it. So if you go down to the Amazon bestseller list, there's a good chance that there are the books that you have heard of and people have told you to read, and it's, they may be classics like Think and Grow Rich, or How to Win Friends and Influence People, or new business books, maybe things by Dan Kennedy. I don't know, but I don't know what's on the Amazon bestseller list. But there's these books that are recurring in the circles of business, and especially in fitness. Everybody's reading the same books. Everybody is doing the same, like implementing the same practices and learning from the same mentors. And so what I want you to do is think outside the box a little bit. There are plenty of books that I have on my bookshelf that were not on an Amazon list, or were not in that circle of must-read books by trainers. But they're books that I found not online, but they're books that I found at like a Barnes & Noble. They're books that I found at used bookstores. So I want you to go and think outside the box a little bit and find those hidden gems. Find the books that are awesome books that people aren't reading, because those are the ones that, they may be old. I have a book that I got years ago from a used bookstore. It's called like 6 Ways to Free Publicity, something like that. The book is awesome. It's super old, but it's got like yellow pages, like it's just like an old beat up book. But I found that at a used bookstore, and it's a great book. So just because it's not on the best-selling list, or it's not in that circle of what others are reading, by no means does that mean you can't go out and find decent books that are kind of hidden gems. So I would go and do that. Now, what about audiobooks? People kind of always are talking about audiobooks. I don't think audiobooks are necessarily the way to go, and here's why. Audiobooks are good if you're doing laundry, or working out, or going for a run, or stuff like that. But in order for what you read to really sink in, and I figured this trick out. I started doing it with every book that I read, and it does pay off. It takes a little bit more time, but it does pay off. If you ever have to go back and thumb through the book, you have like a Cliff's Notes version of what you read. And this is to go through the book and take notes and highlight. It takes a little bit more time, but what you read will sink in, and at the end of reading the book, you will have bullet points and notes. And what I try and do is, at the end of each chapter, if there isn't one already in the book, I'll summarize bullet points and summarize the chapter in like quick notes, so that I can always go through and check out a chapter that I read in a couple minutes, as opposed to rereading the entire chapter again. So that's the one downside of audiobooks. Is that you can't do that with audiobooks. A lot of people like audiobooks. A lot of people don't like to read, which is fine. But for me, I would rather read. Sit down, take the time to read, and let it sink in. Audiobooks, you can miss an important point because you are busy doing laundry, or maybe listening to an audiobook and then somebody calls you on the phone, so then you get on the phone but the audiobook's still playing. It's like things like that. You don't have your full attention when you're listening to an audiobook. When you are reading, you have to have your full attention. Otherwise, you get nothing. Your eyes can follow the words, but you get nothing out of it. So I would recommend reading. If you just do audiobooks, read a little bit more. It doesn't have to be 100% reading, but I would do both. I would do both. If you do read, continue to read. Maybe 1 or 2 audiobooks once in a while. Podcasts are good too. But if you're reading for the sake of growth and you really want something to sink in, read it, highlight it, put a star next to it, and then write some notes. I'll even take a few sentences of something that I read in a book, a sentence or so. If it really sticks out to me, I'll write that sentence next to where the sentence appears. I'll write it in the margin, because when you write stuff down, it actually solidifies it in your mind because you wrote it down. You kind of remember writing it down. So if you ever thumb through the book again, you have that point. You wrote it in your own handwriting. It does something subconsciously to help you to get the material a little bit better. And the last point I want to make about books is step outside of your comfort zone. You're never going to know. You hear people say you can't judge a book by its cover, which is true, but you never know what book is going to speak to you until you actually read it. So if you're used to reading business books or marketing books, read another type of book. Read self-help book, or read if you're always reading self-help books or self-improvement books, maybe read a marketing book. You're going to get stuff out of books that are not necessarily in your immediate wheelhouse, but they will speak to you, and you'll pick things from those certain books that you may not necessarily read or be a typical book you might read, but you'll find a way to implement it in your life. It may not be in business, maybe you'll do it in your personal life, but every book that speaks to you has factors that factor into different facets of your life. So don't just think that marketing is strictly for marketing. You can read a marketing book or a sales book, and it can improve the way maybe you talk to your family members, or maybe it can improve the way it can improve your relationship with your spouse, just based on how it teaches you how to talk to people. Do you know what I mean? So there's different areas of your life that books can hit, even though the title says marketing or sales letter or whatever. You could take the things from the book and apply it to different facets of your life. So the bottom line is that you should read to further your business, to further yourself, to improve your life, to improve the lives of people around you, people that you love. But there are guidelines to this. So again, if a book does not speak to you, ditch it. If the book doesn't speak to you in the first 5 chapters, it's probably not going to speak to you. The author's style, their tone, the way they write is not going to change. And it's not English class, so you don't necessarily have to 100% absolutely read it. Nobody's quizzing you on it, okay? So if it doesn't speak to you, ditch it, all right? Find books that speak to you. Take books and take action on them, right? So read books, take action. Don't just continue to read books and not take action and implement. Take a few things out of each book and figure out what's the most important thing you want to implement and do that, okay? You don't have to implement everything in a book, but take a few things and take action on them. Your life will improve, your business will improve. Don't be that person like that trainer that gets all the certifications and does nothing with them. It's useless at that point. So don't just read and not take action or implement the things you're reading on, because nothing will change. You can't fool yourself by prepping for things and not doing. When you prep more than you do, it's never a good mixture. And then the last couple points, find the books, those hidden gems in bookstores, and use bookstores and regular bookstores, because a lot of times bookstores may have local authors that have their book in that local bookstore that you may not see on Amazon. And a lot of times bookstores have weird books, like a lot of weird books that like Amazon doesn't have. So go through Barnes & Noble, take a couple hours and you drop your kids off at the mall or whatever, and go to Barnes & Noble and look through the aisles and just see what speaks to you. Look at the titles, thumb through some books. We're in a day and age where we can get everything we want online, but there's something to be said for actually going out and doing the work and getting books that other people may not necessarily be reading. And then who knows, you find that hidden gem, you start sharing it with people, and then maybe that book becomes a big book later on. Then you can always say you started reading that first before everybody else. And then the last thing is audiobooks. Don't put too much stock into them. Read the books instead if you can. Take notes, highlight, fold pages over. Make the book your bitch, pretty much. Make that book work for you. You know what I mean? Make that book. My books are all torn up and they're beat up, and there's highlights and there's folded pages, and then there's pen marks and there's writing and there's, but you make that book yours. You make that book yours. You can't do that with an audiobook. All right. So limit the audiobooks. Listen to podcasts instead, because podcasts you can miss a point or two and not necessarily, because it's more conversational. But books, if you're reading a self-help or a business book, definitely read it. Okay. The last one is step outside your comfort zone. Take books you wouldn't normally read and implement stuff into your daily life and into your business from those books that you may not necessarily read on a regular basis. That's all I got, guys. Thank you for listening. Real quick, again, I remind you, just go to iTunes, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, or Anchor. Subscribe to the podcast. It's also available in video format on YouTube. If you do find it on YouTube, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And last but not least, I started a blog for the podcast as well. It is now up. I know it wasn't up a few days ago. It's called beastlife247.com. Go check it out. It's just my way of giving back to guys who want to take their life to the next level and hopefully not struggle with the things that I've struggled with in business over the last 6 years. So that's all I got, guys. Go subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.